So here in my video, you can see the shadow root because I'm in development mode. But practically speaking, this should be only just one line of code. So yeah, this is how they came up with a way to standardize how a web component can work. So what is the big win out of this? The biggest win is basically anyone now can create a component without worrying much about what is the target platform. I no longer need to create a component that is made for React. I no longer need to create a component that works with specific .NET specifications. I just create a standard web component, and I'm pretty confident that any browser, any modern browser, should be able to support it. The next problem was application model. So what is the problem with application model? Again, there was a lot of initiatives. Actually, Electron might be like the most modern one of them, defining how an application model, a web application model, looks like on the web. And now, anyone here is an Android developer? Okay, so as an Android developer, if I ask you how to create a new Android application, what is the answer? Probably it's go to IntelliJ, new Android project, bam, everything is created, right? And there is one and only one standard way how the structure of the files look like. You cannot just invent a new way. It's standard way, just one structure, right? But the web is different. If I tell you, for example, if you are a .NET developer, it's different. If you are a PHP developer, it's different. If you are a Valent developer, it's different from everyone. Everyone has his own way to develop a web application, and even if two are using PHP, then everyone creates an application, a web application differently, right? So this is a problem. We don't have a standard way how to define a web application and package it and send it to the browser in a standard way, not to mention that later on we don't also have a standard way how to deal with the browser. Luckily, the magic, progressive web apps. So I'm quoting Alex Russell here and adding from my own perspective that progressive web apps, anyone heard about progressive web apps? So, good. Those who didn't hear about progressive web apps. So, I like to always say that progressive web apps are not a new programming language. It's not a new programming language. It's not a new JavaScript tool that you must use. It doesn't have to be even JavaScript. Progressive web apps, I like to call it as a checklist of items that if you follow, then your application will be qualified as PWA. In many cases, like Alibaba, you know Alibaba, right? So Alibaba, for example, they decided to go all the way and migrate their whole website to be a PWA. But then, for example, Air Berlin, they decided, no, we don't have the capacity and resources to make this whole migration. So what they're going to do is basically they're going to slice part of the website and they're going to just transform part of the PWA checklist, but they're not going to follow all the capabilities of PWA, which is fine. It's one step forward. So what is PWA? I like to define PWA as two main things. The first thing is something called manifest file. The manifest file is the definition file that defines what is your application. You give it what is the icon, what is the description, what is the starting point, where to start the application, what is the color, what is the theme, and so on. Just a definition that your browser can understand. Guess what? This is standard, which means that if a browser doesn't understand this file, it's not a browser anymore, right? So all browsers now support the manifest, and basically this manifest must be in the root of your web server. So you just inject it inside your head of your index file or something like that, and that's it. You have managed to give a definition to your browser about what is the web application that you have created. So that was the easy one. Second one is something called service worker, which again I like to call it the installer of the web. So many years ago, we used to have this installer.exe. You download and install. And if you are very, very advanced, then you get an installer that is a very small file. When you double click on it, it starts to download the libraries from the web, right? So more or less, this is the same thing. But the advantage here is that it's a JavaScript file and it's standard. What does that mean? It means that you don't need to ask permission, and like you don't have to ask the user to download the file. It's just a JavaScript file that is included inside your web application. And also, it's standard, which means that you put a standard code in it, and any browser on any platform will understand it. Whether it's a mobile phone, desktop, anything else, it will work. So what is a service worker doing? The service worker will act as the middle point between whatever in the front end and whatever happening on the back end. So it can deal with, for example, your back end, your web service. It can deal with your application. It can reload the application, change the behavior of the application, and eventually it should be able to send notifications. And if you take a closer look, since it is the middle point here, and it has got downloaded one single time at least, then it is able also to deal with the fact of being offline. So if you are here on the mobile, and you try to load a website, it will go to the service worker, then you should be able to put a code that detects if this is available or not. If this is not available, you still can return back to the user and show something. It can be very simple, like, sorry, I cannot load because I'm offline, or you can just load something cached from the database, right? So how to define a service worker? Well, yeah, some old browsers don't still support service workers, so you need to make that check. But all modern browsers, including Safari on iPhone, they all support service worker. But what's more interesting is that basically you need to call navigator.serviceworker.register and give it the JavaScript file. And as I told you, you don't need any permission to download a JavaScript file inside the browser. Now that might sound like harmful or something like that. We're gonna see that you cannot do anything without the user permission, and you cannot use any capabilities of a service worker without actually having a secure connection between you and the browser. Why is that? Because service worker can do something like getting the location of the device. So imagine if I made a service worker that tries to get the location of the device, and I transfer this over non-secure channel. Then the browser here, can be Chrome or Firefox or whatever, they are responsible about the harm done of transferring the location to someone in the middle. That's why all browsers agree that they cannot do any capabilities of a service worker unless if your website is over SSL. Now, a few more examples. So I told you one of the very famous examples is being able to cache the files and return them when you are offline. So what I'm going to do here is basically listen to the fetch event. I have a cache that I'm going to try to match it and check if I have the cache and fetch it if there is no interrupt. Of course, there are a lot of caching strategies. So there is a strategy that, for example, check if there is network connection. If there is no network, then bring from the cache, or always bring from the cache and update the cache from the network on the background. Or there are a lot of strategies, but here I'm trying to simplifying it. Of course, it's up to your business to decide what is the best strategies that should work for you. Another example is basically adding a push notification. So you can listen, for example, to the push, and here I'm just defining a few variables, putting it in the push, and then asking to show notification. Now, this is going to send a push notification on the device. Whether it's a desktop, it's going to be a native notification shown on the desktop, or if it's a mobile application, it's going to show a native notification. Please note that here, I'm showing a notification without installing any application. And one more thing, I'm showing a notification even if the application is not open. So the browser can be killed, the browser tab can be like not working at all, and everything in the laptop or my mobile device can be not working at all, but still I can receive the notification. Why? Because of the service worker. And because this is a very high level of spam source, that's why to be able to get a notification like this one, the user must accept to receive notifications.
So in the browser is closed, there is some process on the background which receives the
Yes. So you can see this clearly on a laptop, for example. If you close Chrome and kill it, you will see that Chrome is still running. It's doing many things, including background synchronization. So service worker can do background synchronization. This background synchronization can be, for example, updating the data. So you want to make sure that your website data is updated. And maybe something like showing notification. So a very bad design that I've seen is when you open a website and it tells you, allow this website to show notification. Once I have visited the browser, the website for the first time ever, what is my impression? What's it gonna do?
No.
Block. I do block. Actually, if you click no or block, you as a developer or you as a business owner, you have lost this user forever. The browser will never show this notification at all, and you will never be able to send notification. Well, except if the user go manually and clear the cache and clear the permissions and everything. Actually, clearing the cache is not enough. He or she has to go specially to enable notification and enable permission for this domain again. So be very, very careful. First of all, if I am a first-time visitor, I probably don't want to receive notifications from you. I want to know what the website is about first. And second of all, I don't want to randomly get this notification when I'm in the middle of doing something. I want this to happen when I am at a later stage, maybe after I have signed up, maybe I went to settings and said okay, I want to receive notifications about what's going on, or something like that. Also, Safari, for example, or Apple was very, very hesitant about releasing something like that because they wanted to make sure that they put the very high standard, blah, blah, blah. So they delayed this a lot, but then when they came up with the service worker, they really did an excellent job that I wish to see in all browsers, which is basically, if a service worker was not used for 2 weeks, then it gets automatically wiped from the device, which is something that I see excellent because think about it. I visit hundreds of websites and then I have hundreds of service workers just lying down and working for no reason. I actually didn't check what Chrome is doing right now. I know that Chrome is doing something, but what I know for sure is at least Safari decided that if a service worker was installed and the website itself was not visited for 2 weeks, then it gets wiped automatically. And this is something that you shouldn't complain about, because if you are a developer of a website or something, you're most likely going to update your service worker every week or something. If you didn't update it for 2 weeks, that's fine. So having it removed from the device, anyway, you're going to download it again next time the user visits you after 1 month or 2 months or so on. So what else? So this is an example of an application. And if you can notice very well, this is, by the way, it's called Expense Manager. If you search online, Expense Manager Vaden, you're going to find it. It shows you how to create a PWA. It's an open source project that shows you how to create a fully fledged PWA and save offline and all these kind of things. But this is an Android device. Can you notice what's very, very special and interesting about it?
Floating bar.
Yes?
Floating bar.
Floating bar? This?
Yes.
Well, this is just a CSS, but here I changed the theme color of the whole device from my application. So I visited demo.vaden.com/expense manager, and then the whole look and feel of the whole device, including the address bar and everything, got changed based on my theme. So this is something that also browsers understand it because of my manifest file. But this is just because I visited the website for the first time. Now, if I visit the website enough number of times, then you will get this little notification. It's a little bit different now, it's a bit shorter now, but it will show you that maybe you are interested in this application, maybe you want to add it to your application list. This notification is not something that I developed as a developer. This is a browser who popped it automatically. So it's a gift from the browser. It tells you, thank you for supporting PWA, thank you for putting all the standards, which is basically having a good theme, having a good communication, having a lightweight application, and also having an icon and definition and description and start URL and so on. Basically for having a manifest file and service worker, as a reward from the browser, they're going to show you this notification automatically for the user. And then the user, if they click on add to home screen, then they will get this little icon on the home screen. Yeah.
Question, does Safari support this?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
To understand?
Oh,
Yeah.
the pop-up doesn't show it yet. Yes, that's a good question. So unfortunately, Safari on iOS doesn't show the pop-up of add to home screen yet because it's not adding to home screen. So the story behind it is add to home screen on Android was just creating a shortcut on the home screen, just a bookmark of a browser, but then now it's part of the application drawer. If you go to the application list, you'll find it that it's one of the applications that you can uninstall it, even though the size is probably 1 kilo or 2 kilobytes only.
But will it open the tab in the browser or totally full screen?
Let's see.
Full screen.
Yes. So once I click on the button, the application is going to pop up as a full screen and running independently in a different process other than a browser. So you can check that yourself and you will find that this is a completely different application. Now it's like a completely standalone application. It is a native application. The small debate now is about whether it's having the functionalities and the speed and performance of a native application or not. The short answer is yes, but the long answer is also depends. So what I want to discuss next is actually the performance and the hardware of this. So we have seen a lot of improvement in the JavaScript engines and how they can render the application and make it fast. So now, if you think about it, the question of having a good performance on the web versus a native application is really, really questionable. Do we really see a difference? Sometimes yes. So that's why there is the so-called Webassembly. So Webassembly is basically converting this code into assembly and run it inside the browser. If you want a closer look, basically this is a V8 engine, the one that used to be used by Google for Google Chrome to run the JavaScript. And basically they go over many steps, but the most interesting step is this one, which is basically they find that if a code gets repeated multiple times, then they optimize it instead of interpret it every single time. So they don't have to read the code again and again. It becomes part of the core of the browser or the application. So WebAssembly, what it does is basically, it does that before. So it's already optimized code and it already runs fast. Benchmarks show that most likely in many or almost all cases, this won't make any difference except in gaming and similar stuff. So probably the biggest use case for WebAssembly, and when you really, nowadays, I'm talking about nowadays, not all devices of course, nowadays when you really need to go to the WebAssembly side, then you probably need to deal with 3D engine, or you want to deal with high graphics and high processing and high algorithm happening on the browser. So, what else? At the beginning I told you my little story about the struggle in the airport. PWA actually is all about removing all this kind of user experience problems and difficulties when dealing with mobile devices. So everything that can be just converted into tabs, then it will more or less become part of the PWA experience. And we are seeing a lot of APIs now being introduced and standardized in the browser that is moving forward this effort. So for example, there is the credential management APIs, which is basically something that can pop up a sign-up window based on any accounts that are installed here inside my device. And it means practically that instead of you developing a sign-in button for Facebook, and a sign-in button for Google, and a sign-in button for Twitter, and I don't know how many other sign-in buttons that you have to display on your website, and then you end up not knowing what kind of accounts your user has. Instead of doing all of that, you just use the credential management, and then the browser will automatically understand what kind of accounts are installed inside my device, and will pop up 2 or 3 of them only, so that I can pick which one I want to choose. Same thing happens. So this is happening for registration and for signing in as well. So later on, I don't really need to even fill a form or wait for the autocomplete to show my password and email and remember me and sign in and all this kind of struggle. That's too many steps. If you are using credential management, then it will automatically know that I am still on this device and I'm still signed in with this Facebook account, for example, then it will just enter without even asking me a question. Same to Contacts API. Well, Contacts API is a little bit debatable, but at least payment request APIs, which is my other talk, you can find it on YouTube. Basically, payment request APIs is a way to do similar stuff for your credit cards. So let's assume that I am a very new user to the web, and I open your website that implements payment request APIs. So what will happen is, of course, nobody knows my credit card already. So what will happen is it will show a pop-up window asking me to fill my data. Now, who is going to show this pop-up window and this validation and everything?
Browser.
The browser. So that's again a gift for you if you use payment request APIs, PWA, SSL, and manifest file. So if you are following the standard, then as a reward from the browser vendor, they will show a pop-up and they will take care of filling the data, such as making sure that it's 16-digit, expiration date, address, phone number, validation, all these kind of things. And then it will be saved inside, of course after user permission, it will be saved inside the wallet of the browser. Now next time I visit any other website on earth that requests payment, what will happen is my wallet will pop up automatically and tell me, do you want to pay with this card? Then I just tap. I don't need to do anything anymore. Now, all across the web, any website on the web, I don't need to enter my credit card credentials anymore. I will just be displayed a list of my commonly used credit cards, and I just can pick one of them and say, pay. There is also very interesting APIs for WebGL, WebVR, storage, Bluetooth, hardware. Pretty much all hardware now is accessible and done from the web.
And video camera also?
Yes. Video camera, microphone, everything.
NFC?
NFC, geofencing, anything. Yeah. So, what is the conclusion? Yeah, I can show you a website now. I can, like after the talk, I can show you, or if I have time, I can show you a website now.
Actually, Google Hangouts.
Here we go. Yeah. So, what is the conclusion? Web components, PWA, and WebAssembly sounds like a good recipe for having a native applications on the web. So, moving forward, when someone tells you, I want a native application, it is something that is pretty much doable on the web. We don't really have to go and invest a lot in Java, Kotlin, iOS, and so on. Again, I'm not telling you that native applications are going anywhere. They are not dying. They are needed, but in many cases, they are not needed.
But these web components already like support the standard by
Yes.
browsers.
All browsers. Maybe except UC browser or
All
Opera
three
Mini.
browsers.
Yeah. So a lot of technologies, a lot of tools, a lot of things that I said today sound like too much on your plate. Again, I quote Paul Lewis, who says that the best way to conquer the web platform is to actually learn the web platform. So to answer the questions that I opened at the beginning of the talk, which framework to learn? Don't. Just learn the web platform. Learn how to create a web component. Learn what is a service worker and how it works, learn the manifest file and how it works. Actually, manifest file doesn't need to learn, it's just a file, right? So you can learn those very basic things, and then you are pretty much ready for the web development. Any language, any framework doesn't matter after this point. Luckily, there are also some tools that help you even move forward. So as I promised you, you don't really have to create web components from scratch every single time. You can use the Polymer library, like ourselves, we at Bottom use it, or you can use also Stencil. Besides Polymer, there are also some frameworks now that can create your application as a PWA application. So if you go to Angular CLI, for example, when you start a new Angular application, one of the options is start a new PWA-ready application. So you don't really have to go and insert a manifest file manually and insert a service worker manually and configure it and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, Workbox is a very interesting. Anyone heard about Workbox? Nice. So Workbox is a very interesting library, mainly backed by Google. It's an open source library that allows you to even do more on the web API's front, and especially on the caching mechanism. So they pretty much handled all the caching scenarios and how to deal with the caching on the front end. And just with one line of code, you can just apply a scenario and it's gonna fix it for you. Now, for the WebAssembly, I'm pretty sure that most of us will never need to write a WebAssembly, the similar way that you never needed to write assembly for the first place. The people who needed to know WebAssembly and needed to write WebAssembly are basically the people who are developing high complicated libraries, like algorithms for 3D manipulation or game engine and so on. They need to know how to convert their C++ libraries into a WebAssembly. And there are tools for that. Nevertheless, what you probably want to know is how to use those libraries. WebAssembly cannot deal with the DOM tree. It's just some kind of algorithm that got optimized for you. So what you can do is just use the outcome of this algorithm. So yes, everything is supported on all browsers. The pop-up window on Safari and very little small things on Safari makes Safari still questionable. Firefox also has small interesting things that are not really supported, but I was told that the release that is getting released in December, 1 month from now, is going to make this green, blue. Well, Internet Explorer, right? So many companies now have started to convert. Please go ahead.
What about support for push notifications on iOS? Because as far as I know, it wasn't supported.
It does work. I use Twitter here. If you tweet me, I will see it.
Supported by them.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So many companies started to go to the web native experience. Their feedback so far is very interesting and very nice. For example, YouTube recently has rewritten their whole website to be web component based instead of the old HTML DOM model. And Twitter, as I said many times, is a PWA. So it seems like a revolution we have here. The browser is trying to more and more becoming the operating system. No wonder that Google is releasing this Chrome OS. But aside from Google, the browser has done a very great job, apparently. This manifest really did a lot of changes on the web. Maybe on 2016 it was just a manifest on the papers, but what we have seen in the last 2 years is a huge improvement. We don't need to worry anymore about those fragmentation of devices. And when it comes to frameworks, it's becoming more and more just pieces of Lego. Very thin layer. The framework is just a very thin layer. All you have to focus about is just to grab those standard manifest file, service worker, web components, libraries created with WebAssembly. Those are standard that can go with you anywhere, with any framework and any language. All you have to do is just to learn the thin layer, how to build those cubes together. Maybe we didn't have flying cars on the web, but at least drones on the web, which is pretty cool. So that was my talk, and if you're wondering, I work for Baden. That's why this little t-shirt. It's our mascot, and Baden actually in Finnish, we are based in Finland, and the mascot means a reindeer. And sometimes you can see it in our logo, clearly. We're interested in we have a bunch of open source web components and open source tools like Baden Router and so on. If you want to check them out, the web components, just go to baden.com/start. And if you want to read a little bit more about progress of web apps, then I invite you to go to baden.com/PWA. It's a huge resource about more or less what I discussed today. Last but not least, I also would love to give kudos to my colleague Marcos, who helped with most of the content of this presentation, as well as he summarized it into a blog post if you want to go back and read something. So having said that, I think we're coming to conclusion here. So any questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
I have two questions for verifying information. Am I right that Apple devices support native application too?
Yes. Yes. It started in February this year.
Okay. And second one, which browser are you using for launching this application? I mean Chrome, or Safari, or
All browsers. So because it's a standard, all browsers are forced to support it anyway. Well, not really forced, but I mean, they sit together and they agreed that this is something that they have to support, and this is happening now. So we see that Firefox, Safari, Chrome, all the browsers do support it now. So you don't have to stick with a specific browser, you can just work with anyone. Okay, one more question?
Two.
Okay, go ahead.
How about web components? What if everybody uses them and develops them using some libraries, different versions of React or others, and they have several megabytes of size, and they all come in one page? We get fat pages in this case, or there is some kind of limitation for that?
There is no limitation. So if I am a very bad developer that developed a web component that is 10 megabytes, for example, then you shouldn't use it.
You could develop it in half a megabyte. Another developer is also making it small, but everybody is using different technologies, so they all sum up in one big size. Is it possible?
So you're afraid that you end up like using maybe, 10 components in your page that summarize into a big size like 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes.
Yes.
Yeah, that can possibly happen. And in this case, you might need to figure out which component is using too much dependencies that you don't need, and also if you can get rid of some of the components, you don't have to like load all of them. But having said that, components, like the concept of web component, is never designed to make a component, its dependencies and everything, a huge, big bulk of thing. It's not like a big, huge application that I'm shipping to you. It should be like very, very small, and this is a very important part of the design of our component.
Okay, thank you. And one more. So you mentioned Electron, and that some applications can run natively in Electron, and you also said that you can have a progressive web app that runs kind of natively. Electron usually uses a lot of RAM because it's starting a web browser inside and doing a lot of stuff that is unnecessary. Is there the same problem with native apps? Do they also run all the libraries and consume like 200-300 megabytes per one app?
Okay, so very good observation here. You mentioned Electron and native apps. Yes. So Electron, they went on their own and they decided how a native application should look like, right? So that's why they ended up with this problem. Even though I have seen that Electron is like doing a very excellent job and their application is like super nice, but still, it's the problem that only Electron can solve. On the other side, because web native applications are standard, and it's anyone who can contribute to this, the end result we are seeing, at least now, is that the browser step in and control this. So if the browser finds that you are consuming a lot of memory or your service worker is doing a lot of things, then it will just limit your memory, and it will not allow you to do a lot of things. One more thing, which is actually two layers of the benefit of the user, not the benefit of the developer, which is basically the data consumption. So you might think that, okay, the service worker can work on the background and can make data synchronization. So me as a developer, I'm going to just keep pushing a lot of data to the browser and that's it. First of all, the browser will not allow this. So he knows that you have a service worker that is registered in the browser. He will appreciate the service worker and understand it, but it will not allow the service worker to run all the time. It will give it an interval. And then moreover, the browser, the operating system itself exerts some more power over the browser. So he will see that, the operating system will see that the browser itself is trying to use data a lot, so it will limit it as well. So two factors here are limiting your service worker. That's why when you're developing a service worker, you need to be super careful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Having said that, there is a tool called Lighthouse. Have you heard about it?
No.
So Lighthouse is a tool that comes built into the Chrome browser. It allows you to model and benchmark your application. It also gives you a score of your application, how much PW ready it is, and so on. So it's a very cool tool. It's in the developer tools of the browser. You can just click on it. So I think I can take one last question. Okay, one last question.
How does Polymer help to work with web components? Because I don't know, Polymer was kind of a prototype for web components. Why should we use Polymer, not just web components?
If you don't want to use Polymer, don't use it. Actually, so Polymer, as you said, Polymer used to be a prototyping or some people thought it's a framework, but what we are using right now is the tools of Polymer that help us create a web component, and that's it. So Polymer now has the so-called lit element. Have you heard about it? So lit element is an initiative or a guidance or a base JavaScript file that you can base on it to create any web component. So I would say it's a helper library that helps you create a web component so that you don't have to write the code again and again all over. Having said that, there is other initiatives like Stencil, for example, which is the same company, Ionic, I think. So Stencil also is a very good tool that people have raised a very interesting feedback about. I would say if you want to use Polymer 3 or Let.html. Let.html is still development mode, so if you are not ready to use it, then Polymer 3. Otherwise, Stencil. All right, I think I have to end at this point, but I'm gonna stick around if you want to ask me any questions. And this is my Twitter if you also want to reach me at any time. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.